time to talk to the Finance Minister and ASC shareholder minister, Simon Birmingham. First, here was an angry French foreign minister describing the betrayal France feels.
C'est vraiment en bon français.
This is what we call in French a stab in the back. We had established a trusting relationship with Australia. This trust is now betrayed. And today, I'm angry, with a lot of bitterness about this breach. Especially given that allies don't do this to one another, even more so after a 2-year contract negotiation.
Simon Birmingham, welcome to the program.
Good morning, David. Good to be with you.
Were you expecting France to recall its ambassador?
David, this was always going to be a difficult decision in relation to France. Now, the reactions that they take and the decisions they take are, of course, matters for the French government. It in no way changes the extremely high value that Australia places on France's knowledge, history, experience and ongoing engagement in the Indo-Pacific region. We value that enormously. We will continue to encourage France to do so, to welcome that and to pursue that at every possible opportunity with our French counterparts.
Part of the anger, though, seems to be the lack of adequate, proper consultation. Less than 3 weeks ago, for example, the French and Australian Defence and Foreign Ministers met, and according to their joint statement, they said they underlined the importance of the future submarine program. I mean, the Australians presumably knew at that point that deal was dead.
What we've announced with the Australia, UK, US strategic security partnership arrangement there is indeed one of the most profound changes in our security posture and settings.
I'll come to that. Sorry, I'll come to that, Minister. My question was about the fact that they said less than 3 weeks ago that this was an important program, but they knew it was dead, didn't they?
And the context I'm putting here is that in such a profound discussion with our UK and US counterparts, in which they have agreed to share nuclear-powered submarine technologies with another country for the first time ever, of course there have been enormous sensitivities to get to the point of being able to announce that discussion. Now we've made it public at the earliest available opportunity. We informed the French government at the earliest available opportunity before it became public. And indeed, prior to that, we have been engaging with the French in terms of the changes that we've been observing in our region, the changes to the strategic nature of competition in the region, the changes to the challenges of the operational capabilities of conventionally powered submarines, and the reasons we've been looking at the nuclear-powered submarine alternative are because of those different changes. And so this has been very sensitive to get to this point in time. We don't underestimate the importance now of working with the French in the future around their engagement across the region and ensuring that we re-establish those strong ties with the French government and counterparts long into the future, because their ongoing engagement in this region is important alongside these decisions that we've made.
It's also an expensive decision to scrap this deal. There will be a cost of cancelling the contract. You said on Friday this will be made public once it's settled. The Prime Minister told AM those figures will remain confidential. Which is it?
Now, the Prime Minister has also indicated that they will be made public once all details and costs are settled. Now, there may be certain elements of commercial settlements that remain confidential. That will depend upon the nature of those commercial discussions with the Naval Group and other commercial parties. But the government's intention is that full costs will be transparent, as we've been in relation to the full costs of expenditure on the submarine program to date. As politicians,
how much are we talking? More than $1 billion here, do you think, or less than that?
I don't want to speculate on the costs going forward. We've been open that $2.4 billion has been expended in relation to the attack class program. Now, that has enhanced Australia's skills and capabilities in a number of ways, so it's not all lost expenditure.
Well, some of it is, though, isn't it, to be fair? I mean, you can't pretend $2.4 billion. Part of that's gone to a building at the Cherbourg shipyard in France, a test site building for a diesel propulsion system we're no longer going to need. A fair bit of this $2.4 billion is wasted, isn't it?
David, as I just acknowledged, that's the cost to date. Some of it ensures that we start the new program with better skills, better capabilities, but indeed some of it is a sunk cost. There's no doubt, David, that the short-term politics or indeed short-term diplomatic relations would have been easier for us just to continue down the previous pathway of building the attack class. However, that would have betrayed Australia's long-term interests. So this difficult decision was taken in the interests of the nation, not just in the next year or two, but in the decades to come, to equip us with the capabilities that we need. It was taken in light of changed evidence and changed information that came to government over the course of the last 5 years, and that's why we've gone down the path of this difficult decision. And we don't step away from those challenges in terms of cost, diplomacy or disruption to workforce, but we're going to work through all of those, confident the pathway that we're now on gives Australia the absolute best potential military capabilities for our security and the peace and security of our region.
Well, let's talk about that pathway, the new nuclear submarines. Have you really committed to something without knowing the cost? Because I seem to recall the Coalition had some pretty strong views about doing that at the last election.
We've committed confident that Australia can meet the costs and that we must meet the costs of embracing this type of platform. We've done so confident because we've been able as a government to increase defence spending from lows when we came to office that hadn't been seen since before World War II to now clearly in excess of 2% of GDP, and we'll need to maintain and possibly even increase that level of defence expenditure.
So you're confident
to sustain.
So you're confident you can meet the cost, you just don't know what that cost is.
We don't have all of the final costs because we're going through this comprehensive 12 to 18 month process in terms of assessing what type of platform, what type of design, what type of infrastructure is going to best be able to be transferred to Australia by the UK and the US in a partnership to build these.
Okay, so is it a blank cheque at the moment, or is there some sort of envelope, some sort of upper limit?
We'll be looking to do it within the most efficient cost and also the most efficient time frame. You know, these are the important considerations, and that's the analysis which has necessitated us to now announce publicly the
What's your upper limit?
That will be undertaken.
Is it 200 billion? Is it more than that? I mean, there must be some limit.
I'm not going to put figures on it that will shape a public speculation about it, David, because it's important that we go into this with the UK and the US able to extract the best possible arrangements for Australia, but we do so knowing we have incredibly willing partners who, as two countries, these aren't commercial engagements where we've engaged another company. In this case, we have engaged with two countries, our closest of allies, who are deeply committed themselves to Australia, not only having the capabilities of nuclear-powered submarines into the future, but having the capability to build them, to sustain them.
But there is an element of commercial engagement here. I mean, what's your negotiating position really like? You've said you're going to buy them. They can name the price, can't they?
No, David, they, as I said, they have strategic interest themselves in ensuring that Australia has this capability, and capability not only to operate them, but to be able to build and sustain them. That's an important part of the nuclear stewardship arrangement, but it is also a crucial part of, as allies and partners, increasing our overall shared capabilities. They want to, as you heard Peter Harcher and others saying before, see increased presence in this region to provide the balance that can provide regional peace and security and support for international norms and laws into the future.
Do you think we'll have to lease or buy one or two submarines from either the US or the UK before we've built one in Australia?
Well, David, doing that won't necessarily increase or wouldn't increase the number of submarines and the capability across all of our partner nations. But indeed doing so may provide opportunities for us to train our sailors, provide the skills and knowledge in terms of how we operate, provide the platforms for us to upgrade the infrastructure, particularly in Perth, that will be necessary for the operation of these submarines. So
Sounds like a good idea.
I expect that we will see, whether it's lease arrangements or whether it is greater joint operations between our navies in the future that sees our sailors working more closely and indeed potentially on UK and US vessels to get that skills, that training, that knowledge. They will be crucial parts of the analysis to be undertaken. But as Joe Biden himself said in the announcement the other day, this is about ensuring that our sailors, our scientists and our industries work more closely together, not just on submarines either, but of course across a whole sweep of different technology platforms, be they artificial intelligence, quantum computing, guided missile technologies. You know, these are all different fields that we expect this strategic partnership to enable Australia to more closely collaborate in with these partners.
And the subs we do build here, are we talking about simply assembling them here, or are we going to try to manufacture them from scratch?
Again, David, that goes to the aspirations, not just of Australia, but of the UK and the US to see capability enhancements in the construction and building realm as well as in the operation realm. And
so is that being still
shared
worked out?
ambition. So that means we're going to be building as much as we possibly can. Obviously, we've explained already that one of the things that has changed dramatically over the last few years is that in relation to submarine technology, they are now able to operate off of a nuclear reactor that lasts for the lifetime, the 30 plus years.
And we can't build that here, right? So that's like the main part of the submarine. We won't be building that here. So
that's right. That's why I highlight that. But then again, the Collins class initial vessels, we were importing the motors from Sweden. So it's not unusual for certain key components for us to be bringing that in. And in relation to those nuclear reactors, there's good reason. And it's what has enabled us to make this step change in considering nuclear-powered submarines, because we won't have to have a civil nuclear industry. We won't have to be enriching uranium ourselves or changing those fuel rods. We will be able to put that reactor in. But we want to build as much of the rest of the submarine as is possible. And importantly, with the UK and the US, we have willing partners who want us to have the capability to build and sustain them ourselves.
Given the unknowns, though, about how much will be built here, the cost, how many, leasing, buying, maybe a couple, can you give any guarantee there will be just as many jobs as under the French contract?
David, the jobs growth into the future is really quite remarkable. On our estimates, there'll be in South Australia some 5,000 jobs supporting our naval shipbuilding industry by 2030. In Western Australia, some 2,000 jobs supporting the naval shipbuilding industry by 2030, and indeed many others across the rest of the country. Now, that number will only grow into the 2030s as construction of the nuclear-powered submarines ramps up, following on from the types of things we've announced in extending and upgrading the life and capabilities of the Collins class, in upgrading the weapons systems on the Hobart class air warfare destroyers, in our investment in terms of additional missile technologies and capabilities as part of our defence shield into the future. So a range of different areas where we see significant jobs growth. We don't do these things, though, for the jobs. We do them for the nation's national security interests first and foremost. That's the important part of the principle. Of course, if we see increased rotations of US or other nations' military working and operating alongside us within Australia, that also provides certain economic dividends. But again, it's not done for those economic dividends. It's done to help to ensure our national security is as strong as possible to support and underpin regional security and prosperity.
Speaking of that, what else does this AUKUS agreement involve? Are we going to see more American troops and ships and planes and even missiles based in Australia?
David, as the US Secretary of State and the US Defence Secretary have been quite clear, there's no quid pro quo attached to the sharing of the nuclear-powered submarine technology, but we absolutely expect to see close collaboration into the future, not just on those nuclear-powered subs, but on those areas of AI, of quantum technology and computing, on those areas of missile technology, and
what about basing American military equipment and personnel?
As I was about to say, and indeed we look to the opportunities. We already have US troops and Marines who work in Australia on rotational deployments at times. We already do close integrated operations alongside our US partners, as we do with a number of other countries, and we always look to explore where they can be enhanced, where they are in Australia's national interest to do so.
Are there any red lines, though? Nuclear-armed vessels, would they be okay?
We've been very clear. Australia's position in relation to nuclear weapons does not change, will not change.
I'm talking about basing American ships or planes here.
All of our non-proliferation treaty agreements and obligations, and we're not changing any of our policies in relation to nuclear weapons technology.
Just to make that clear, though, for viewers, is Australia's position that we won't have American nuclear-armed Navy vessels in our ports?
David, our position in relation to the basing of nuclear weapons in Australia remains unchanged.
Which is what?
Well, our position is that we haven't got nuclear weapons based in Australia, and we won't be having nuclear weapons by Australia, based in Australia, or under other circumstances based in Australia.
By the US?
I said, or under other circumstances, having nuclear weapons based in Australia. Our policy in relation to nuclear weapons does not change.
Right. Can I just ask you about Christian Porter? should, in your view, ministers of the Crown accept anonymous donations?
Well, David, I'm not going to give a personal opinion. The Prime Minister has done the right thing by acknowledging that this instance raises some serious questions. It's why he has asked for precise and proper advice from his department, and I look forward to that being received, and the Prime Minister will no doubt then act on that advice accordingly.
But you're a minister, surely you can have a personal view. Would you accept an anonymous donation?
Well, I am a minister, I can have personal views, but it's not for me to go out as a minister expressing personal views. It is for me as a minister to work as part of the government. The Prime Minister has done the right thing in this regard. We should all act in accordance with the letter and the spirit of the Ministerial Code of Conduct.
Sure, but what do you mean you can't express a view on this, Minister? Would you accept an anonymous
David, you're asking me for a personal opinion.
No, I'm asking, would you accept an anonymous donation?
That is what you asked me for.
Yes. What's your opinion? Would you accept an anonymous donation?
Well, David, I'm not going to go into personal opinions. The Ministerial Code is, I think, clear in relation to the fact that we need to undertake a range of different disclosures. The Prime Minister's rightly sought proper advice on that, and I expect that he will receive that and will act upon it.
Are you honestly saying it's unclear whether or not it's okay for a minister to accept an anonymous donation?
I think as the Prime Minister has made clear, this question where a disclosure has been made but the disclosure itself presents other questions is an unusual one. That's why he has sought precise and specific advice on that, as he's done in relation to previous questions around conduct and compliance with the Code of Conduct.
Okay, but finally on this, surely you can see most Australians would agree that the idea of a politician receiving anonymously a donation to deal with some personal bills is not okay.
Well, the reason we have the Code of Conduct in place, the reason we have disclosure obligations in place is to provide transparency. It's important, as I said before, that all of us abide by the letter and spirit of that Code of Conduct. The Prime Minister rightly seeking that advice to make sure that in this case, where a disclosure has been made, he is appropriately and fully informed around whether that disclosure meets that standard, and if it doesn't, what action needs to be taken.
Simon Birmingham, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, David. My pleasure.